Hello, everybody. My name is Rick McCutcheon. I'm a Dynamics 365 MVP, and I'm here today with Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld. Jason, tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about MSDynamicsWorld.
Hey, Rick, thanks so much for having me back. My name is Jason Gumpert. I am the editor at MSDynamicsWorld. I have been involved with the site, helped co-found it back in 2008, and I'm generally responsible for any of the editorial content that comes out. I host the podcast for the site, and I, work with my co-founder Adam Berezin on, managing the business and a lot of the behind-the-scenes work that goes on to related to the site itself and our planning. So it's a full-time job.
So, when I look at MSDynamicsWorld, and sometimes we refer to it as MSDW, talk about who the members are, because I think it's fairly impressive with the audience that you've pulled together.
Yeah, our audience is pretty evenly divided between Microsoft channel readers and Microsoft customers. And so we write for really both of those audiences. Primarily, I would say that's about 80% of our readers is between customers and partners. The rest are some mix of people who work in the sort of the ISV realm, Microsoft representatives themselves, prospective customers, trainers, recruiters. I mean, then there's this sort of mix of that last 20%. So yeah, we're really writing for the channel and for the customer base, and not every piece of content that we put out is for everybody. I think some of them really definitely appeal to customers. Some of them very much appeal to channel members, and some are kind of general enough that they impact everyone. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about sort of what those content breakdowns are. I know, but yeah, and then I think geographically, and maybe it's just worth briefly mentioning. We write for global audience as well. I think at least 40 to 50% are outside of North America in our audience.
Okay, that's great. So I think it's probably the best audience for, Microsoft business applications. And I've been working with your team for a couple of years producing these thought leadership events. And now we have these, what we're calling partner awareness events, where mostly ISVs are kind of explaining their products to the other channel partners. So let's talk a little bit about content, because I know your organization does a lot of research into content and what's working and what people are getting the best results from these days.
Yeah, and that all feeds into some of the work that you've been doing with us and some of the events you've been working on, and some of our findings in polling our customers, or polling our readers, I should say, and just our observation on how different kinds of content perform. That's always something, as a media business, we're always looking at. And certainly some of these very targeted, very focused events that you've done with a variety of organizations in our space through MSDW for our readers, for our members, have really resonated, because they really fit into some of those ideals that we tend to preach about. So things like being extremely targeted in who you're writing or presenting to is really one of the core tenets of what we talk about. And that can be something fairly straightforward, like if it's about Business Central, focus your content and your message on Business Central, obviously. But it can be even a little more subtle than that, where you really just have to go at any topic in a fairly direct way and be willing to talk about it, without being circumspect. And I think if you look at a lot of our events, and especially the events that really perform well, many of which are the ones that you do on our event platform, they're really going at a particular topic, and that's really what we love to see.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing more and more partners really, and people from Microsoft are joining in too, around thought leadership, right? Because we could talk about the software only for so long, and then we've kind of got to get into how it's done and how it's done right. And I think that's a lot of the content we're creating these days.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it should be always, some of the specific things I tend to think about when I look at an idea for a new event. Who is it really for? Is it like you said, if it's going to be a sort of a partner strategy event, that's great, and it should be clearly presented for that audience. And there should be no doubt when you sort of read about what it's going to be, that it appeals to that audience. And then when it's actually presented, it should, go right to that audience and speak to them, and not be too broad, not be too generalized. And I think that's something that honestly a lot of marketers have come to understand in the last couple of years, and some are still getting that message. But I think the numbers really bear it out when you look at how people respond to a particular event. They do it when the message is really good.
So, talk about the message being really good. What I'm seeing now is we've got conference season actually starting this fall. So I think, we're going to finally, shift away from being completely online to actually getting together this fall. So talk a little bit about some of the events that you'll be attending.
Yeah, on my personal calendar, I have the direct, excuse me. Well, first I have the DynamicsCon live event, which is in September in San Antonio. So that's an event that we're doing some preview content on. Some of it's already up on our site. We have more coming, depending on when this actually goes up. But yeah, that's I would call that a highly curated live experience with a couple of days of sessions across 4 tracks, with GP and Power Platform, I believe, sharing a track, but and then all the other Dynamics 365 products as well. And I know that the committee took a little bit of a different approach to assembling the event schedule for this event as opposed to some of their virtual events. And yeah, I mean, from what I've learned so far, the sessions look great. They're going to hit on some really good topics, and just I've had my head around doing some previews, and some of the content I've been learning about really looks great too. So I'll be at that event. I'm also planning to be at the Directions EMEA event in Hamburg in November. That is a very different event, one with a long legacy and really focused on, whereas DynamicsCon Live is really for a customer audience, but also partners. Directions, as you know, Directions events, generally speaking, are really partner focused. And I mean, if I had to say where I've seen the energy and the enthusiasm for live events so far, I think it's growing on the customer side, but I think really partners have been really eager to get together. I think we saw that at the Directions North America event a few months back, and I think this November event in Germany will be really high energy in terms of what partners can expect.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because we were both in Orlando for Directions North America, and that first night of networking on the show floor, I mean, I've never seen so many conversations happening around me. Like, it was like everybody I hadn't seen in a couple of years were in that room all chatting it up. So I think the partners are really looking forward to that. We talked also a little bit about Ignite, and Microsoft's one of their premier shows is going to happen again in October, and it looks like they're going to have a virtual and live option for that event. So that's the first time we're seeing that from a Microsoft event in a while.
Yeah, and it largely fits into what I thought Microsoft might do to get back into the live event business. I think I've said this before a couple of times, but I think there's no denying how impactful their virtual event strategy has been over the last, since the pandemic started. The idea that they could take these really large in-person events like Build, like Ignite, like Inspire, put them online, and then multiply their attendance many-fold is hugely powerful, and speaks to the accessibility, the value of that accessibility for the broader Microsoft ecosystem. And so I'm sure they're aware of that. I'm not telling them something they don't know. And it appears that they're not going to get rid of that and go straight back to in-person. They're doing some kind of a hybrid for Ignite this year, and we'll have to see how it goes from there. I think that's a sign they'll start easing back into an in-person option for their own events, as opposed to sort of farming out in-person events to other organizations. So yeah, and I mean, personally, I think the media angle for that event, Ignite, will be all online. So I don't know if I'll be there in person, but it looks like that's the direction they're going, to make some amount of in-person experience available.
Okay. All right, Jason, thanks a lot for your time today. I really appreciate you joining me on Partner Talks, and we'll be back to you probably sometime in the new year to talk about, what's new with MSDynamicsWorld, and what are you seeing out there in the channel that is making things exciting as usual.
Thanks, Rick. It's a pleasure.
Bye for now.